Hey everyone, great to have you back for our ThinkScripting class. My name is Mike Fairbourn. Hoping you're having a good day and a good week in the markets. We're just ahead of the weekend here, so happy Friday to all of you folks. We're still seeing the market run up a little bit and really wanted to take a deeper dive this week and going into a little bit more of the details as we discussed for new traders, new investors who are looking, or I should say new to ThinkScript. You might be traders for quite some time or investors, but newer to ThinkScript and just showing you some of the capabilities that we have available to you that are very, very easy to set up, yet they can be very powerful. This week, I want to talk about indicators specifically. Last week, we talked a lot about price action. There's a lot we can do with prices, crossing different ranges, etc., along those lines. But this week, it's going to be a focus in on indicators, just because there's a lot that can be done with that ThinkScript, and we want to make sure that you are familiar with it and know that it's available to you right with the condition wizard. So, having said that, love to welcome you all. We do have Ray. How's it going, Ray? Robert Boucher. We've got BJ. And we've got Cameron May in the chat, so appreciate Cam being here to help out. Folks, too, before we get into this, too, a quick note for everybody that is in the room right now. If you do have anything you want me to show you today on the Condition Wizard, or, in addition, I've got a ThinkScript that I built for an individual earlier this week. It may have been Ray, as I'm thinking about it, but talked to so many people, I can't quite remember. We're going to take a look at that for sure as well. But I also wanted to see if there's anything, any sort of indicators you wanted to look at in terms of indicators, crossing over particular indicators. I've got a couple. I tried to be creative this week, and I look forward to sharing that with you. Hopefully it'll generate some ideas for you. All right. Well, having said all that, let's turn to our disclosures so we can get going here. Information here is for general information purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Paper money software application is for education purposes only. Now, backtesting results presented are hypothetical. There is no guarantee that the same strategy implemented today would produce similar results. With that, investing does involve risk, including the loss of principal, and past performance of any security strategy does not guarantee future results or success. So here we are, folks, we're back at it to our steps to scripting slide, talking about goal identification. Now, when we are using the wizard, call it the wizard because it can do a lot of stuff, but when we are using the condition wizard, in a lot of cases, as long as the goal that we're looking at ties into what's available in the condition wizard, generally, then we can oftentimes skip right to number 2 and answer this with a yes, or I should say the second bullet point, and that is, can ThinkScripting meet the goal? If it's in the wizard, all we need to have is a little bit of creativity to find some very interesting ways to simplify, let's say, for example, breakouts, tests at a particular value, or, for example, crossovers, indicator, prices, whatever the case might be. There's a lot there that can be done just so quick. So I want to dive into the indicator aspect of it today, and we don't want to leave the indicators behind. All right, so with that, we'll definitely share those scripts. We're going to actually go through and build them. I do have one to share, though, as we do get started here right out of the gates, and this actually gets us into our discussion today. So I thought it was a great kind of a request that I'd seen earlier, sort of a topic request to sort of look at there. All right, but here we are. Well, we know what's been happening in the markets. We did have a rather gigantic move this week, really post-presidential election, in line with a lot of historical kind of moves that we might get this time of the year, and more recently, presidential moves. At least the last 3 have had some pretty strong Novembers. Of course, things can change, but there you have it. Now, that's a fairly big move out of the gates here, as you can see. And with this, what's interesting here is we are getting strength within the dollar. Just as a side note, the dollar has had a nice rally. And a lot of times, if you get strength in the U.S. economy, it can be beneficial on a number of different fronts as well. I thought I'd just throw that out there to you because this is kind of an interesting one to keep an eye on. And of course, you can ThinkScript around different sort of indications with the US dollar too, because it is kind of like one of those big picture governing dynamics of the market. It can be in terms of dollar strength or weakness. All right. Well, welcome, Ocean Life. Will, howdy to you, sir, as well as Ricebird, folks. We are talking about some indicators today. we did have an indicator that was actually I think it was on Tuesday that did come up, and it was this. We talk a lot about the RSI. We can go back to just we'll just say S&P 500 index here. The question came up was, how do we put a on the RSI a moving average? And I thought that is a really actually I don't know if I'd seen that before, but it is actually a really unique concept because a lot of times the RSI tends to bounce around a lot. It's only looking at 14 days, but you can get a buildup in the RSI in terms of momentum strength that can happen over a period of time, and it can be actually quite strong because the RSI is a momentum indicator. However, it is an oscillator. But if you want something to kind of show a longer term perspective beyond the 14 days, kind of an average of that time frame, well, put a moving average on there. Now, I did create this indicator that looks at money flow, and we would have to use something like the ES here that we have a volume on. I put it down here at the bottom where we tied in this class a way to combine momentum, MOM for short, we'll just call it momentum there, and then you've got down here volume accumulation, we'll just call it volume for short, and then with that, I've got the money flow, momentum money flow, which ties in combinations of the RSI and the money flow line together. And what it will tend to do is it will show that broader strength as long as there's volume that kicks in. So if you're going to get accumulation of volume over time, in other words, I got to put it in here, a big plus. And when I say plus, it's accumulative, right? So it's not oscillating. So it's like a stock or an index or whatever. It can go up over a long period of time. So is it accumulating or distributing? If that volume is going up and we're getting general momentum, overall momentum going higher, then the money flow, momentum money flow, which I've termed it here, should hold basically in this overbought range for a period of time. Now, if you zoom back, you'll see that using this indicator, as I've been working with it quite a bit over the last couple of weeks in more detail, when things are neutral to bearish in the market, it will tend to hold towards the lower end. Okay, but it might come right up to near this 50 level. It's interesting because it ties in a lot of RSI activity, but it says generally speaking, it's just a very, very weak move, sideways to down. And what this indicates is not just so much sideways action, which we can see up here in price, and prices are captured by the RSI, but what's not capturing it is the volume. And the volume was actually, cumulatively speaking, weak. So the momentum money flow held at lower levels. Now, that's not what we see now. Fast forward to the present, we're showing strength and we're holding really above an overbought level, but that's really kind of an indication of strength when using this indicator. Now, there is a cool aspect because I've tied them in together. These are kind of a couple that I use, but and this is, I think this is you'd find this actually in the playlist. I might be able to grab that before we're done, but that's the playlist for this class. If you wanted to check that out, we talk about it specifically, how to build it and whatnot, and just the script itself. But what I want to talk about even more, and I'll just kind of hide these right now, was the request this week, which I thought was a nice little addition to it, no doubt about it. And that is taking and putting a moving average on the RSI, which you cannot do by itself. You know that there is like this up top here. If I were to go in, I can actually add in an indicator called like a simple moving average, right? And we could see what that simple moving average is. I've put it in over here. I've added another one. I've got plenty. But you'll notice in that simple moving average, if I click over here to the right, what do I have? This is what I have available. I've got price. I've got open. I've got a few things we could put a moving average on. This right here is actually a pivot. That's a pivot point. The high-low close divided by 3. That'd be a fun one to look at today, actually. We've got volume, but is anybody here? Am I missing it? Do you see RSI in there? The answer to that would be simply no. You don't see any other indicators in here, but I've got a script for you today that I worked on, build out that you can substitute indicators in if you wanted to put a moving average on top of it. That's kind of, it leads us into our broader discussion today, but I wanted to share this first because I mentioned that I would have it I kind of said I would have it available on Friday, and I did, but I had to put a little bit of time into it. Assuming I could do it, it was a little bit longer than I thought, but it is doable. So let's do that. So it said, we don't have RSI, so we can't add that moving average on there. Now, if you had a moving average on here, in fact, I'll talk about it. Let's go ahead and just put it on, and I'll show it to you right now. So this is the moving average, the RSI moving average here. So I've just titled it, as close as I can to a description of what it is, the RSI moving average. Now, what I've done on that moving average before I dive into it, it does put a moving average in here, but if I click on my wheel, so we can look at some of the parameters, you can have the RSI length up top, you can have the moving average length as well. You can change these. You can have these types of moving averages in here too. So it's nice and easy. It's simple. It's a simple selection. You can easily go in and, by the way, capitalize these, but everything else should be capitalized when you read it. That's interesting. But say, for example, this is something that I thought could be, here's a shorter term moving average, like a 9. Okay. I'm going to change some of the colors in here too, but I can share this. Like, say, for example, the RSI, we'll go with like a 3. And we'll go over here too. But then we'll say like the moving average on the RSI. You could change some of these colors, and we'll just put this to a 2. So now what we get is a moving average on the indicator itself. Now, how could this be helpful and useful? What sort of indications could we see? Let me give you a sense of this, how it could be utilized. In fact, before I go any further, let me just go ahead and share it so you all have it. I will have it available too, the script within the description section of YouTube. You just want to click on more if you're viewing this later as a recorded session here. But let's go ahead and just share this right now. Of course, you could change the colors and whatnot down below, and it can be turned into a script. A scan. This is a script just as an indicator to kind of take a look at it, which was the original request. Let me put this into the chat. And it's just a quick note too, for this, I'll type it up here. So RSI moving average. There it is right now. As I share that, just a quick note that all the ThinkScripts are not guaranteed for timeliness or accuracy. In fact, they're reliant on the data that's coming into the platform. So if that data was wrong, then of course these would be wrong. But of course, a lot of time, the data we'd have is very good data, but I just wanted to share that. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at it here. You can change this. We're going to go and I'm going to show you how you can change this into a different indicator too, but I've got the structure of the script in place. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. All right, I did just notice too, as I'm looking in the chat, there is a survey link in there, folks. If you like this kind of content, something helpful, useful, if you wouldn't mind filling that out. There's only 2 questions, and it's very quick. I look at all those results. My manager does too. He sends those to me. We got to take a look at them. So if and by the way, topic requests as well. So, okay. While we're at it, be sure to subscribe. We're almost at 125,000 subscribers, bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Be sure to do that. Hit the like button as well if you like the content. Folks, now, let's take a look at this. Now, why would an indicator like this be so interesting? It could be helpful, the RSI. I can't ever remember seeing a moving average on an RSI, and I've used the RSI for a very, very long time. So it was one I'm like, gosh, not only do I want to fulfill the request, but I just can't wait to see the results of it. Let me kind of explain what's somewhat interesting about the RSI here using a moving average. You're just kind of looking at this time frame of this run to the upside here. Okay, you get a nice run to the upside. It's almost like by the way, I do use quite a bit of Elliott wave. It looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And a lot of times if you do get the 5 waves, you get a pullback in terms of an A, B, C consolidation. And it kind of looks really familiar in that front to me as I look at this. But, if you were following Elliott wave, you could also maybe be looking at the RSI for indications. Now, one thing, as we made a new high up here into this range, you'll notice something else with an indicator. First of all, just the RSI by itself. RSI did make a lower high here, a pretty clear lower high, even at this topping point. Okay. Now, once you get a change in that RSI, what you might be looking for is an indication, a further indication of a moving average breakdown. And when you look at a moving average, there are a couple of different ways to do it. Now that we've got a moving average on here, this is just a 9. I'm going to show you a 30 in just a second. But with the 9, how this could potentially be useful is notice that, okay, it's still going higher, but what happens is it begins to go lower. In other words, the moving average itself begins to trend down. That could be an interesting indication, all else equal, because if there's an area that prices are at that you think it could be topping, you could just wait and see if, first of all, the moving average starts to roll over, or if the RSI itself begins to break below that moving average. And so what are we talking about? This is, like I said, it was a great lead in to today's discussion that we'd actually talked about last week, which is indicators, moving with indicators, and how to quickly script for it. Let's take a look at that script right now, but that would be one way to look at this. You can see it down here as well. This is fascinating. There was a big spike up. Let's flip it around here real quick. There's the RSI down here. Remember, now the RSI could be a signal amplifier in a sense, and it can give us a really good sense of closing prices, which is exactly what it measures in terms of percentage closing prices. Now, if you get that, you might just want to say, I'm waiting for the confirm over here. Okay, I know we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but only a couple of indicators. It's just simply a moving average on that RSI. Let me just try another, a different one, like a longer term, a little bit longer term. That's a standard kind of a 9 period, but here is your 30 period. That's all you got to do. Just go into your gear. Once you have the script in place, click OK and OK again, and you got it. Now, this is the one I really wanted to focus in on because there's going to be less. It's basically you take your RSI, which is looking at closing prices and the momentum of closing prices on a percentage basis over the prior 14 bars. That's the one, that's the default. That happens to be, I think, what a lot of traders use. It's just the one I have standard on my charts as well. Key here is examining the exact same condition. When you got above that level, you're holding above it on the RSI. What might be an indication that this trend is weakening? Well, a break below that you didn't have right there. Look how early you're getting that. Kind of towards right near the top. Right near the top. Now, is that going to happen every time? No, but again, it taps into what the RSI can provide us in terms of that momentum. And then it says, okay, let's use an average of the shift of that RSI, which happens to be 14. Let's get back to black here, times roughly 2. That'd be 28 days. Wells Wilder built this in 1978. It was based upon a half of a moon cycle, which is 28 days, but we're roughly, 28, which is approximately 30. I've just used like a 30 period moving average on it. But there you go. Notice you get above there. Where might you get an indication, a quicker indication of the oh gosh, I'm really trying to get this going straight, and I don't know if I will. Where was the crossover? Where did the RSI come back up above that level? Like I said, sometimes indicators are signal amplifications. And so when is that starting to dry up and when is the move kicking in? Actually, I think it might have started right at that bar, but it was slowing down quite a bit like a flag pattern, and boom, possibly a wave 3 Elliott wave right there. You got the starting point right there. Okay. All righty. Any questions on that? We're throwing out a lot of stuff, but let's see. Perfect. Thank you. Cam's got that. Yep. So that's it. And yep, Cam noted again, survey link, folks. If you get a chance to throw that out in the survey, we'll go through it. What I want to do in ThinkScript, though, is I don't want to just throw out indications. I want to show how maybe traders can use them and why they might be useful, because we got to go back to this. Does anything make sense if it doesn't, if we can't identify the goal, right? If we're not looking for, let's say, for example, turning points on a chart. Turning points can always be interesting where they pivot. A pivot point, so to speak, is not an exact pivot point, but those can be helpful. And ThinkScript is helping us to create sort of through your guys' creativity. Ray, was it you? I think it might have been Ray, but somebody had asked for it earlier this week, and I thought, my gosh, I hadn't seen one of those before. So tied into our class. So that's where we're at. But that's why we do it, and that's why we're here. So to build these and to see how they can, in a simple fashion, give us some additional indications that we might not otherwise see in the market. Because what a cool way to kind of monitor and measure momentum. All right. So having said that, let's do this. We've got to go into that script so we could just highlight a couple of details. To do that, once you've got the script, which I did share, right at the bottom here, we've got plenty now. I'm going to highlight this for you. And note that we are defining the indicator up top in terms of our input. Now, could there be a different thing we could be looking at? A different indicator? Yes. Basically and effectively here, as you see the RSI, you could have another indicator. There could be a MACD, say for example, well, the MACD itself actually has a moving average on it, but let me just think about this for a second. I mean, there can be other indicators that show this kind of momentum. Say, for example, I use the RSI so much, but I think there are a number of them. What is there? Is it the awesome oscillator? It's an oscillator nonetheless. Moving averages on that. There's just tons of indicators. I'll let you guys look at that. And if there's something you want me to look at, I'd be happy to down the road. But I mean, like, for example, yeah, we can knock ourselves out over here. Anytime we're looking at oscillators too, that are giving us indications of strength, momentum, or whatever the case is, just go under studies up top. We can go right down here because it identifies it under a quick study. There are your momentum studies. In fact, there are so many of them. CCI is another one. Awesome oscillator. You can go down here. You can just, there are so many we actually have to put them in, break them down. We just can't fit them all in. So there you have the breakdowns there. Oh, there's the ultimate. Not to be confused with the awesome, right? But they're both, there you go. They both got those names. And then you got some others in there too. This is an interesting one too. I want to look at this down the road for sure, this Woody's CCI. There's actually also a Woody's pivot point. I don't know who Woody was, but he had some interesting ideas. Okay, yes, we can scan. We can scan for that, Ray. I've got to jump into the other stuff though right now, but that's something we could do for sure. And I can get, we can develop that. Yeah, it's just a matter of putting it there. In fact, we could have it as a column as well. In other words, the RSI is broken above its moving average of the last 30 days within the last, 5 days. And that could be a column that lights up green in a 1 or red, or simply just a scan over here too, which I do want to dive into today in terms of that scan. All right, good stuff. I do like the creativity. So it was an interesting thought. So I've looked at it for so long, I was just so focused in on it. I never really thought like, hey, there's a lot you could potentially get with an RSI. This was just based upon the market, but of course, individual stocks could be of interest too. Let's see, what do we have moving lately? Tesla. Changes in trend up here. You're kind of getting weakness before earnings. And then this is very, very choppy, but here's another one over here. Ooh, bounced off resistance and came down. Yeah. So look at these across stocks, markets, whatever you guys could think of. Some cool stuff to look at. All right, let's do it. So we want to talk a little bit about, well, kind of where we're at right now. But remember last week we did talk about prices, and we talked about prices moving around indicators specifically. Today, we want to really look at indicators moving above different indicators. And here's an example of it, right? The RSI moving average. But if we get into, let's just move to scans here too while we're at it. Let's go into add filter. I'm going to scoot down here, folks. If you've used this, studies where you're at. Okay, and we can scan. Now, right now, it's going to scan specifically consumer discretionary based on a class I did earlier this week. I'm going to take this off. I'm going to clear that filter. Very, very important, first and foremost, when you are using the scan tab and the stock hacker, right? We're drilling down to the stock hacker. What you want to scan in is very, very important. This is like key. If you have penny stocks coming up in here, there could be substantial risks there. I mean, there are risks in all stocks, but I mean, with penny stocks, I mean, liquidity issues, funding issues, whatever the case might be with the company. A lot of times in this class, we'll just use this as kind of a standard. Of course, you could use the NASDAQ 100. You could use the NYSE. You just want to be mindful of that. I think it's a key point. Once we've added that study indicator in, like I just clicked on right here, so I want to find some exact stock examples here for you in this portion of our discussion. But let's use this indicator to find stocks within the S&P 500. And we can do that next week, like I said, with the RSI moving average, no problem. But let's do this for now. Let's pull this up and see what we can get, some specific examples. And I want to take a look at some of the kind of the interesting ways, and I think using the condition wizard that could be really helpful, simple, but yet provide us some pretty good information about what might be happening with a given company based on the indicator. So first things first, click on the little pencil or pen over there. Take a look at your setup here. You're going to want to cancel the ADX crossover. And again, I wanted to have a couple of sessions for people that are just getting involved with ThinkScript. We did one last week, this one, and then we'll just move back to kind of some of our regular stuff. But we want to always tie in some of the basics so that you can actually use this really, right now and try to use it effectively for what you're after. So condition wizard is where we're at. This is where we could create coding right here. But the condition wizard can help us in this regard. Let's go ahead and add condition right now. So we talked a lot about price last week, right? But today we're going to talk about studies and studies on top of studies. So I'm going to use a study here, starting off with something really, really basic, and that's going to be the simple moving average. Simple moving average. In fact, let's get this going here too, because I want to talk about it talk about it and then outline it for you. So we'll go 20, we'll bold this out. This week, it's going to be really indicator. Okay, or indicators, for example. Could be an indicator or indicators. Let's clarify that. But in this case, what we'll do is pull this back down, take this off, just kind of highlight this. And what we'll do is we'll say, an indicator, I'm not going to be able to see that. Okay, indicator reaching let's do this. Let's start this. Indicator crossing another indicator. Now, this could be, above. It could be crossing below. Right? It could be either of those two. I'm going to do this and say that we'll look at, first off, we'll say something like just really basic here. Why is that flipping back? Okay, here we go. I have to actually type this up during class. I can't do it before. So it's got to be like live typed up. Otherwise, I could just copy and paste, but I want to make sure we're showing it too. So moving average crossover. Now, what is a big moving average crossover that you guys have heard of before? I mean, say, for example, we'll just say, let's see, there is the Golden Cross. That one comes to mind. Golden Cross, for example. There could be others in there. There's the Death Cross as well. That'd be crossing below. But the Golden Cross would be looking just basically using a moving average crossover, right? So specifically moving average up over a moving average. So two moving averages. So I'm just going to put down here, it's a moving average crossover. It could be crossing over anything. In this case, it could be a moving average. And I'll go actually put this down here to line up better because we're talking about a moving average. So let's just do this so easily here. We can do it so straightforward on the condition wizard. It's just too easy almost to do. If I could move this around. Okay, there we go. So we've got our length in here, and that's going to be the 50-period moving average crossing above. It could either be greater than, or it could be crossing above another simple moving average. So you think about a short-term moving average showing strength relative to a longer-term moving average, and that moving average is going to be a 200-period moving average. I think maybe one of the most commonly used moving averages on a big picture scale. There you have it right there. It's going to be a 200-day moving average. And then we can also define, is it just going to be over one bar? Let's just see if we have any happening today, because this really tries to represent here for us a longer-term moving average, right? A crossover, potentially a longer-term indication of a trend, because basically you're getting the 50 that's crossing above, the 200. And so you're getting that strength possibly right in here. It might take a little while, actually, for a 50 to even curve up. It might even take it longer for it to reach the 200. And so all of that time that it takes to get a curve up and a crossover right there, all of that time could mean on the chart down here that you're doing one of these. You're kind of bottoming. You're forming a bottom, and then bam, you're starting to move with more strength, and then you might then get a change in trend. So it's a unique way to see maybe an intermediate to a long-term change in trend. It's done. We already have it in place. Let's just verify it here. The 50-period moving average crosses above the 200-day in the last bar. We can change this as much as we want. Let's click OK, and let's just see what this gets us for the S&P 500 today. Click on it. We actually only have 2, but you might not get a lot. If I said the last 5 days, you're going to see more because this has been a strong week. Let's look at these. So a carrier, a freight line, ODFL, Old Dominion Freight, ODFL, right there. Okay, so we did have a crossover. Let's go ahead and change this out. Our moving average, RSI, we're going to have to just take that study off for just a second, but we'll add in now some moving averages up top. And we have let's go ahead and put a 50 in. We'll change this to a 50 so we can see that. The 50 is going to be there. Show study. Got to make sure you put that show study box in. Otherwise, all the work you do is nothing. We got the 200 in here as well. The 200 is going to be in red, a little bit thicker. We'll click on Show Study. So we've got red and green. There you go. Did we cross? Bam. Just barely. We have to say, like, today we crossed over. Okay. Was that an interesting indication on the chart? I mean, we're seeing a lot of these out there in the general market. This one, I think, on Old Dominion Freight is a little bit interesting because this has been here for a while. I mean, that's August of 23. This is 23 over here. That's August of 23. This is really first part of this year. We had, we kind of hit some resistance. So resistance. Might we kind of hold back in this range? Possibly. There is a big gap in there, but it took a while, did it not, for the 50 to get back above the 200? When did we get the death cross? We got the death cross right there. A little bit, it's 50 going below the 200. That was back in May. It took it some months. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you add this, it's basically about a 6-month time frame before you were able to get that 50, even though you bottomed over here in June. A month later after you dipped, or less than a month, you bottomed and you started to come back up. It still took it almost 6 months approximately to get the golden cross over here. So could that be useful? Could be. The other one we had up there was PayX. I mean, what else is going on here? What do we see? With this oil dropping, oil obviously a huge input cost for freight line companies. And having said that, maybe some of these companies are set to have just better profit margins as well. I think it was Paycom, wasn't it? Or PAYC, yeah, Paycom Software. I don't even know what Paycom does, but it could draw your attention to it. That's a substantial jump relative to where it's been in the past. Now, we don't know where that's going to go in the future, but I'm just saying that is a very, very big move relative to where it's been over here. Expensive stock, but this has been kind of down for a long time. That is 23, mid-23 over here, 2023 that is, and that is a substantial boom. So that might have actually caught us. This Golden Cross could have maybe caught something very interesting about earnings, perhaps. It looks like the market interpreted it that way. Okay. By the way, did they beat? How much did they beat by? One. Come on. Click on it. Should go. Okay, so they did beat expectations by about, what, 47 cents or something like that. Okay. So what does Paycom do? Analyze tab, because I'm looking to know myself fundamentals. Let's go down here. Cloud-based human capital management. Blah, blah, blah. There you go. Okay. Well, that was an indicator crossing over an indicator. What did we just do earlier? We did something very, very similar, and that was we had a moving average crossover, but it was above the RSI. And now you guys have a script kind of a standard script that could be used for other indicators. Indicators, there we go. Okay, so indicator crossing another indicator. Interesting. Moving average, crossing over a, sort of other indicators too. I'm just thinking about it. What might that look like with a, longer term moving average on a Bollinger Band too? The averages of the Bollinger Bands, whatever the case might be, there could be some interesting things. We do have this one over here too that I had mentioned. We talked about this, but this is up top. This is just the MACD crossover. So what's going on with the MACD? Well, that's actually the MACD with the moving average of the MACD itself in there. This is just the crossovers in the last 3 days. We've got a lot of them. Of course, a lot of times when we were looking at this earlier, we'd get like maybe 5 to 10, on any given day for the last 3 days. And now look at this. Whoa, lots. Okay, you get the point. That's a lot of green in there. So that's another one. MACD is in terms of another indicator. We talked about that. Well, what about, for example, in terms of an indicator, so we can still tie in price to an indicator. We talked about some of that last week, but when we do that, we're saying price, but there's, okay, we'll use this at the end to kind of be creative because I want to hit one more before we're done, and that is when we're talking about an indicator, we can also say this, an indicator reaching a specific level. I'm going to pick on the RSI again because I do use it a lot. And one thing I do want you guys to take a look at. So here is an indicator reaching a specific level. So what might that level be? Well, when we're talking about it, it could be, in fact, just put this a little bit, put a little star in here instead, because we'll kind of expand this out a little bit. And we could say, it's trading at, above, or below a particular level, right? It could also be crossing above, below. Be thinking about the indicators as I go through this. Be thinking about what you use, and so you can utilize this tool in this fashion. I'll show you how to do it right now. Below a value. So let's dive into it. And by the way, that value, just one other final note, what could that value be? Well, it could be an overbought level. If we were talking about the RSI, it could be oversold, right? That's true. It could be also construed as a bullish level, right? And on top of that, you can have indicators, and we're just looking at the RSI, that might be let's say, for example, a resistance level on the RSI itself. Okay, could the RSI be crossing a trend line? Could the RSI be breaking a trend line? Okay, let's say, for example, the oversold, if we were using the example here, example RSI, we could say overbought would be 70 and oversold would be 30. And those are standard levels. We could easily state, an RSI is breaking above a value here. It was down below 30, and now it's shooting up through 30. A bullish level on the RSI, which is going to be a fun one to actually look at, is maybe just saying the 50% number, the 50 level, 50 value. Where are we at? Because a lot of traders will say bullish if it's above 50, bearish if it's below. But what about one that's just crossing above a 50 value? That's totally different, right? Than, let's say, the moving average on the RSI. So what we could do is we could go over here and we could go into our scan tab. Now that we've got this built, I'll take this off for a second. We'll go back and do another one here. We're going to go into our study. Just go through the process again. We'll click on our pen over here to open that up. To pull up our window, I'm going to delete what I've got in there now. Make sure we're on the condition wizard and just finally just add in condition. Now, as we add in this condition, let's talk about this. So we're saying study RSI. Okay, RSI, click on it, crosses above. So we're still saying cross above, but it's going to be a value. Notice it's right there, value. The value is going to be 50 on the RSI. So easy, but it could be really quite helpful to use. What companies had in the S&P 500 have crossed above their 50 RSI today, showing indications that maybe the underlying stock momentum is strong and they might trend higher. Let's click on save right here and I'll show you. That's it. It's so simple. But I mean, if you think about it, really kind of spend this time and saying, what is my goal? And then you can look in the ThinkScript, specifically the wizard, as you're just starting off now, because we've had a lot of topic requests on that, but how to utilize that, right? And learn those steps once you've got the goal in mind. I'll zoom back here real quick to highlight this, but let's go back and show it to you right now. Let's go ahead and just hit scan. There were 27 companies in the S&P 500 that did break above that level. You can recognize some of these names too. I certainly do. Lowe's is in there. Philip Morris. See GE. Let's look at a few of those. Here is, well, we'll just leave our moving averages on here. GE right there. Actually, let me take them off. They're kind of getting in the way. We're past that. So there you go. There's GE. Did it get above the RSI? I'll zoom in on it for y'all. There's the 6-month. Just above the 50 today? Sure did. It just crossed above today. Maybe a resumption of the upward trend? Well, perhaps. Right? The next one was Philip Morris we talked about. Did it get above the 50? It did. Will this consolidate here? Could there be a K hold down the road or whatever the case might be? What's interesting about the 50 RSI, a lot of times you're going to see, and the reason why I've highlighted it is because you're going to get potentially a few possible flag patterns here with an indication of strength. Could it be a flag? At least it can draw our eyes to it fairly early. Now, why would that RSI show first? Folks, it's momentum. It's measuring over the past 14 days the changes of the closing price. So see how I really understand the indicator here, right? We have a good sense of what that indicator is doing. So it could give an early indication about the possibility of just going above a value here, 50. We're just barely above 50, but could that be something? The last one we can look at here too is Lowe's. Okay, do you see a potential flag pattern here as the RSI is getting above 50? Folks, I wouldn't show this to you if it was just, not something that you normally see. I'm just not going to waste your time. Your time's valuable. We'll look at indicators here that might have something to do with the performance down the road, perhaps, right? That's the whole idea, right? What is it that traders, investors might be using? Breaking above the 50 RSI is interesting, but a lot of times it's like right when it's happening, right? Because to get up in this range over here to show additional strength on that RSI, sorry, I could have expanded that for you. You didn't have to squint. But if we get up higher, this is kind of one of the key turning points. Does it get above 50 that a lot of traders, investors use? How else are you going to find something like this across 500 companies? Are you going to pull out your magnifying glass and just sit there and look at that 50 and say, yep, we're just getting above it. What does it look like? No, just come over here under that scan tab and input a very simple, but yet very powerful, potentially powerful code you could throw right in there. Is that easy enough? RSI crosses above 50, but it's got to be doing it today. Interesting. Got Starbucks in there. Have fun with this, you guys. And by the way, come in here and take a look at, for example, the NASDAQ 100. Oh, that's the composite. Let's go. That's a big one. You could look at the composite. There's a lot going on there. You might want to add some additional filters. There it is. The 100. Tech heavy. Tech's been quite strong. So there you go. Only 3, but there's your Starbucks showing up. Only 3 in the NASDAQ 100 getting above that level. Look for potential flags there, folks. But this is what we discussed today. Hope you found this informative and useful. I did want to come back and talk about this. I didn't get a chance. I was going to do a pivot point one. Maybe we can say that for next week. And by the way, I would have done it, Ray. we would have done that. We would have put this in the condition wizard in a scan today if it was possible. But we actually had to create a script for a moving average on the RSI, which we did do. Right? We posted that in the chat. All right, you guys. Well, hey, take a look at this. Look forward to future discussions. Again, be sure to subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner. There was a survey link that was out there. Maybe Cam can repost that if possible, just in the final minute here. But always great to be with you guys. Folks, have a terrific rest of the day, a great weekend. Utilize this. We'll talk about it more next week.